Since man discovered he possesses a self, he has been living a lie so deep and ingrained that it has become the source of all his suffering. You wake up every morning feeding an illusion that Schopenhauer called the greatest of deceptions. The belief that you are separate from the world, that your ego is real and needs constant validation. But what if I told you that this void you feel, this insatiable thirst for recognition, isn't your failure, but the very nature of human existence revealed? Arthur Schopenhauer, the 19th century German philosopher, penetrated deeper into the abyss of the human condition than any thinker before him. While others promise salvation through reason or faith, Schopenhauer had the courage to look directly into the void and declare, "Life is suffering." But this wasn't gratuitous pessimism. It was the revelation of a truth that our society desperately tries to hide, that the ego you defend so fiercely is merely a mental construction, a ghost that eternally cries out for meaning that can never be satisfied. Over the next 20 minutes, we won't just explore Schopenhauer's theories. We'll dive into the laboratory of the human mind and extract a practical manual for understanding the illusory nature of the ego and perhaps finding a way to transcend it. Prepare yourself, for the knowledge you're about to receive is simultaneously liberating and disturbing. This is the path beyond the illusion of self. The blind and insatiable. Will Schopenhauer's first law is devastating in its simplicity. Man is driven by a blind and insatiable will. It's not your conscious desires that direct you, but a primitive and irrational force that can never be satisfied. Schopenhauer discovered that behind all our seemingly different desires, fame, love, power, money, exists a single force, the will to live. This force has no purpose, no direction, no end. It's like an engine that runs eternally without destination. When you feel that constant restlessness, that sensation that something is missing in your life, you're experiencing the will in its purest form. The ego is merely the mask it wears to manifest itself. Consider the legend of Sisyphus, condemned by the gods to eternally push a boulder up a mountain, only to watch it roll back down. Schopenhauer saw in this image the perfect representation of the human condition. But there's an even more revealing historical case. Alexander the Great. Here was a man who conquered the known world before age 30. When there were no more territories to conquer, he wept. Not from joy, but from profound emptiness. The will had consumed all available objectives, and what remained? The hollow echo of the next impossible conquest. Observe social media today. Every like, every comment, every new professional achievement is just more fuel for the insatiable will. You reach a goal, feel brief satisfaction, and then the void returns. The influencer with millions of followers still feels it's not enough. The billionaire CEO still wants more. This is the will operating through the modern ego. First, recognize that permanent satisfaction is an illusion. Stop seeking the definitive conquest that will finally complete you. Second, observe your desires without judgment. When you feel that familiar hunger for validation, pause and acknowledge, this is the will speaking, not me. The illusion of individuality. The second law is even more revolutionary. The individual ego is an illusion created by the veil of Maya. What you call I is merely a distortion of perception. Schopenhauer, influenced by Hindu sacred texts, understood that individuality is like a wave believing itself separate from the ocean. Maya, the veil of illusion, makes you perceive boundaries where none exist. The ego is not a real entity, but a mental process that creates the sensation of separation. When you say, I want, I need, I deserve, you're feeding a phantom. During World War I, soldiers reported mystical experiences on the battlefields. Moments when individual consciousness disappeared and they felt connected to something greater. A British soldier described, "For a moment, there was no more me and them. There was only the pure experience of existence." Schopenhauer would say this soldier had a glimpse of reality behind the veil of Maya, the understanding that separation is illusory. The epidemic of modern anxiety and depression is largely the result of hyper-individualization. When you believe you're completely separate from others, every problem becomes solitary. Every pain becomes isolated. Social media intensifies this, creating profiles that seem to prove our unique individuality when they actually reveal universal patterns of behavior. First, practice impersonal observation. When you feel anger or frustration, ask, who is feeling this? You'll discover it's difficult to locate a fixed I. Second, cultivate compassion by recognizing that others' suffering is fundamentally the same as yours. The world as representation. The third law destroys our relationship with reality. The world you perceive is only representation, not reality. You've never had contact with the real world, only with your mental interpretations of it. Schopenhauer revolutionized our understanding of perception. Everything you believe to be real, colors, sounds, textures, exists only in your mind. The external world is processed through mental filters that create a representation, never the thing itself. This representation is constructed by the ego to maintain the illusion of separation and control. Plato narrated the allegory of the cave, where prisoners mistake shadows on the wall for reality. But consider a more modern case. The virtual reality experiments of the 1990s. Participants, after hours in virtual environments, reported difficulty distinguishing between their virtual and real experiences. Schopenhauer would say this confusion reveals a profound truth. There was never a fundamental difference between real and virtual. Everything is mental representation. Fake news and social media reality filters are extreme manifestations of something that was always true. You live in a bubble of representations. Your reality is constructed by your beliefs, fears, and desires. Two people can live in the same physical world and inhabit completely different realities. First, question your certainties. When you have a strong emotional reaction, ask, what am I representing to myself? Second, practice suspension of judgment. Recognize that your version of events is just one possible interpretation. So far, we've established the fundamental pillars of Schopenhauerian philosophy. You've understood that you're driven by an insatiable will, that your individuality is illusory, and that the world you perceive is only representation. These are the foundations of the existential prison in which we all live. But recognizing the prison is only the first step. Now we're going to explore the most advanced and dangerous tactics that Schopenhauer developed to transcend this condition. The next laws aren't for the faint-hearted. They teach how to use art, compassion, and the denial of will to achieve states of consciousness that few humans experience. Prepare to discover the secrets of liberation. The first advanced tactic is liberating. Through aesthetic contemplation, you can temporarily escape the tyranny of the will. art offers moments of existential silence. Schopenhauer discovered that when you completely lose yourself in a work of art, whether a painting, a symphony, or a tragedy, something extraordinary happens. The will falls silent. For a few precious moments, you're no longer a desperate ego-seeking satisfaction, but pure contemplative consciousness. This is the only state in which suffering naturally ceases. Beethoven composed his Ninth Symphony while completely deaf. Schopenhauer saw in this creation proof that art transcends individual limitations. Beethoven was no longer creating as Ludwig van Beethoven, the deaf and bitter man, but as a channel for something universal. Listeners who lose themselves in the Ode to Joy experience the same phenomenon, the temporary dissolution of ego into pure aesthetic experience. In our world of constant distractions, true aesthetic experience has become rare. Watching a movie while checking your phone isn't aesthetic contemplation. It's just more fuel for the restless will. Viral art on social media is designed to stimulate, not to calm. True art demands total presence, complete surrender. First, create rituals of aesthetic contemplation. Choose a work of art and dedicate yourself to it completely without distractions. Second, practice purposeless contemplation. Observe a landscape, listen to music, read poetry, without trying to extract practical utility. The second tactic is revolutionary. Genuine compassion arises when you recognize that the other's suffering is literally your own suffering. This isn't metaphor, but direct perception of reality. Schopenhauer understood that true compassion isn't an emotional feeling, but clear perception. When you see beyond the veil of Maya, you recognize that the boundary between I and other is artificial. The suffering you see in the other is the same insatiable will operating in you, just manifested through a different form. During the cholera epidemic of 1832, Schopenhauer observed how some people risked their lives to care for strangers. He noted that these people didn't act for moral duty or expectation of reward, but from an intuitive recognition that there was no real difference between them and the sufferers. A nurse told him, "I can't explain why I do this. I simply can't see the difference between my pain and theirs." Modern political polarization is the opposite of Schopenhauerian compassion. When you demonize the other side, you're reinforcing the illusion of separation. True compassion recognizes that even those you disagree with are manifestations of the same blind will operating in you. Your enemies are suffering from the same basic illusions. First, when you feel anger toward someone, ask, what kind of suffering led them to act this way? Second, practice identity meditation. Visualize yourself literally in the other's place, recognizing that you are faces of the same existence. The third tactic is the most dangerous and liberating. Complete denial of the will to live is the only permanent exit from suffering. This is Schopenhauer's most radical discovery. Schopenhauer realized that all other methods, pleasure, knowledge, art, compassion, offered only temporary relief. The only permanent solution is total denial of the will that drives us. This doesn't mean suicide, which would be just another manifestation of the will. It means complete cessation of the desire to continue existing as a separate ego. Schopenhauer studied Eastern ascetic traditions and found in Buddha a perfect example. Siddhartha Gautama wasn't a depressed or defeated man, but someone who had recognized the fundamental futility of all desires. His enlightenment wasn't an ego achievement, but its complete dissolution. When Buddha spoke about the end of suffering, he was describing precisely what Schopenhauer called the denial of the will. This tactic is extremely dangerous in the modern world, where we're constantly encouraged to want more. Denial of the will doesn't mean becoming passive or apathetic, but recognizing that the pursuit of satisfaction is fundamentally futile. Great artists, saints, and sages often demonstrate aspects of this denial. They create and help not from personal desire, but from understanding beyond ego. First, practice desire fasting, periods where you consciously don't seek satisfaction. Second, cultivate wise indifference. Continue acting in the world, but without attachment to the results of your actions. Throughout this journey through Schopenhauer's mind, you've discovered truths that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You've understood that you're driven by an insatiable will, that your individuality is illusory, and that the world you perceive is only representation. These aren't just philosophical theories. They're precise descriptions of your daily experience. You've also learned the advanced tactics, how art offers temporary escape, how compassion reveals fundamental unity, and how denial of the will points to definitive liberation. Together, these understandings form a complete system for transcending the ego's illusion and its empty clamor for meaning. This knowledge is a double-edged sword. It can be used to build a life of wisdom and compassion, or it can lead to nihilism and despair. Schopenhauer himself struggled with depression throughout his life. The choice, as always, rests in your hands. Use this knowledge to free yourself from the illusions that cause suffering, to develop genuine compassion for others, and to find moments of peace amid the chaos of existence. But remember, wisdom without compassion is cruelty, and compassion without wisdom is sentimentalism. The path is narrow, but it's the only one that leads beyond the ego's void. In the comments, share which of these Schopenhauerian tactics you find most revealing and why. Have you ever experienced moments of escape from the will through art or compassion? If this journey of self-discovery resonates with you, subscribe to the channel to continue exploring the deepest secrets of human psychology and existential philosophy. Your like is the signal that this knowledge has value and should be shared with others who seek to understand the nature of human existence.